Hi. In this presentation, we're looking at how ancient nomads in Central Asia had an effect on a big part of the world today. It's a lesson that links world history, world geography, and a little bit of science, specifically linguistics. It's about how historians can gather evidence from archaeology, from linguistics, and from DNA science to trace the origin and spread of populations and the things those populations carry with them, their languages, their inventions, some of their rules. The photo shows one edge of the vast steppelands, the grasslands of Central Asia. The grasslands are north of the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, and they stretch from Europe all the way over to northern China. A satellite image shows them as a kind of a light green color in between the dark green of the forest and the tan and yellows of the desert. It's a lot easier to see the extent of the grasslands on a much simpler map. They're larger in Eurasia than in North America because Eurasia is bigger than North America. But the climate is very similar. It's cold, it's fairly dry. The steppelands of Central Asia are very much like central Canada, which is also a grassland. Now, should we study the grasslands in the middle of Eurasia? And the answer is because our language and an awful lot of important inventions came from this part of the world. That's true whether we live in the United States, Canada, England, Germany, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Netherlands, Belgium, France, Greece, Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, lots of places. How could this be? About 7,000 years ago, some people lived in the forest valleys that were right near the edges of these grasslands, in places just like that. They lived in wooden houses. They ate seeds, fruit, fish from the creeks, meat from horses, deer, and other animals that they hunted. For 1,000 years, their populations grew slowly but continuously, and hunting became a lot harder after they killed off most of the big, slow animals. And the people learned how to keep horses for milk and meat when hunting was not successful. The population kept growing. Hunting and herding became harder as the grass nearby was overgrazed. People learned how to ride horses. To do that, they had to invent things like rope and bridles to control the horses. This allowed them to go much farther away from the river valleys, and all of this land became available for horse herding. And they became grassland people rather than edge of forest people. And they began to sell horses to people in other regions. Then the climate turned colder. And when that happened, some of these people moved south of the Black Sea. They later on became known as the Hittites, and we're going to see them later in the story here. Another group moved east across some high mountains. They were first called the Chariots. They lived as hunters, herders, traders, and then they kind of disappeared as a separate group. Some of them may have joined the Xiongnu, the horse riding warriors who attacked China. And later, others may have joined the Mongols, which were horse riding warriors who attacked China and Europe. And where did they learn how to ride horses? And where did they get the equipment that it took to ride horses? In fact, where did they get the horses? Were these people in Central Asia? Meanwhile, back in Central Asia, in the steppe region, the climate got warmer, and about the same time, they discovered how to build wagons. And a wagon let them carry food and water, and that let them go even farther away from the river valleys because they could camp in their wagons for weeks at a time. With this, the population grew very rapidly for more than 500 years. And as the population grew, the people moved away in a number of different directions. This is a really long story, and I'm going to tell it really quickly. and then we'll put it on a map. Here's the quick story. Some of the people moved west. They became Celts, Scots, Irish, Welsh, Romans, Italian, French, Spanish, Romanians. Some of them moved northwest. They became German, Dutch, Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, Frisian. Some went north. They became Ukrainian, Polish, Russian, Belarusian. Some went southwest. They became Greek, Serbian, Croatian. Still later, some of them went southeast. They became Persian, Indic, Hindi. In short, the people that came from this region became known by many other names, from Ireland to Russia, from Spain to India, as they spread out. So let's stop here and ask a question. If these people are so important, why don't we read about them when we're studying about ancient river civilizations? And I suggest that there are three reasons why we don't see them in a textbook that might have been written in like 1995 or something like that. Because until 1990, this area was part of the Soviet Union, and it was really hard for archaeologists to study there. And basically, the people that were studying were trying to prove that they had lived there a long time. That meant the Russians, Ukrainians, Georgians. This was a dangerous part of the world for thousands of years. Chechnya, Crimea, Ukraine. People had been fighting. And these people lived in houses that were made out of wood or tents made out of animal skin, and they lived in wagons for months. In other words, they're not leaving much in the way of an archaeological record that's going to survive. I mean, they couldn't build a stone temple. They didn't have the tools. They didn't even have stone. They couldn't build a stone pyramid that would last forever. What they left were their equivalent of a pyramid, a grave mound called a kurgan. Some of them are pretty big. In fact, it's really easy to look at that and think it's just a natural hill. You can see a truck parked next to it, until you dig into it and you realize that that's a burial mound. And archaeologists are now investigating what these people buried, and they're finding horses and weapons and pottery and jewelry and all kinds of other stuff. So let's take a map and trace the spread of horse-drawn chariots as they are recorded in burial mounds in Central Asia and then in other places around the world. The first evidence of chariots is some old graves dated about 2000 BC near the southern Ural Mountains, northeast of the Caspian Sea. That's right at the edge of a huge cold desert. It's the southern edge of the grasslands. To the north is a big forest that looks like northern Canada. There's a hardwood forest west of it, and then you've got these cold grasslands. If you draw a line around these grasslands, you can see they go, like we said, from Eastern Europe to northern China. And to get an idea about how big this is, there's the United States at the same scale. The chariot inventors lived in a place that was north of Minnesota and Wisconsin and Michigan. The numbers that we put on this map shows what archaeologists have found where chariots were part of the culture at different times in history. And the ones are within 100 years of when they were invented and so on. And we made this into a student activity. The student can just kind of draw a circle around the area that they were in 100 years and color that dark, and then draw a circle around 200 years and color that a little lighter, and then 300 years. And what you see is that the idea of chariots had spread from this area in Central Asia out to China over 500 years. And in fact, the Chinese character for chariots looks just like the pictures of the petroglyphs in the Ural Mountains. And that they had, at the same time, spread east and south into Egypt. Well, We could take numbers off and add a key to explain what the colors mean, and now you've got a map that looks just about what you might see in the textbook now. And it took about 500 years for the idea of making and using war chariots to spread from the river valley civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia down into the Indus Valley and all the way into the Huanghe River of China. So when you see a picture like this on an Egyptian stone carving showing the Battle of Kadesh, where Ramses defeated the Hittites, or so he says, and two important facts. Number one, the Hittites originally moved here from the grasslands of Central Asia, bringing the idea of chariots with them. And both sides were using war chariots that were invented by the grassland people north of the Black Sea. That's not the only thing that those people invented. They invented bridles and all the other equipment. They invented wagons, and their language spread with them. We've got another map activity your students could use. But this is what we mean by a spreading language. In the ancient language of Indo-European, wheel, and I don't know exactly how this is pronounced, but it's basically rata, an R and a T with a vowel in between. An axle is an AK with an S, axle. And in German, that's Rad and Achse. And in Old Latin, it's Radi and Axis. And in Persian, it's Ratha and Axis. And in India, it's Ratha and Axas. And in Old Russian, and you get the idea. In Portuguese, it's Rode and Exe. In Spanish, it's Redo and Eje. And in English, we use the word wheel, but we've also got words like round, rotate, rotary, radius, radial tire, rotund, rotunda, all of these words that are an R and a D separated by a vowel. And we've got axis and axial, and we make our graphs with an axis on them. Many modern languages, as are shown on this map, started as one old language spoken by some horse herders in the steppes of Central Asia, and then it spread all the way out. As these people moved away, when the climate changed, this is still happening. The languages keep changing. We add different words every year. We add words like pizza and iPhone and television, and we changed some meanings. Hard rock used to mean a very different thing 50 years ago. And tweet, and we changed some spellings. And eventually it becomes a slightly different language. You want more proof? Look what happened to a familiar prayer over just 1,000 years, and we'll give you a couple websites on that one. If you want more archaeological information, the key book is called The Horse, the Wheel, and Language by David Anthony. If you want a completely different line of evidence, look at Ancestor DNA in an article that is available easily on Google Scholar. A copy of this presentation, the student activities, printable maps, and a list of all these sites can be downloaded from the Giants website. You should check it out.